If you've been following this channel for any amount of time, but certainly for the past, almost 2 years now, what I think one of the central ideas that you'll find that I grapple with a lot is the idea of being the perfectionist and at the same time being the professional, as if you will, being the individual who writes to survive. And it's often an idea that is very diametrically opposed to the perfectionist, right? And I'm starting to realize that one of these ideologies needs to die. Either you need to abandon being a perfectionist and be professional, or abandon the professionalism and be the perfectionist. It's difficult to match both, right? Because the professional needs to submit to survive, and submitting to survive means submitting volumes of work. If you are trying to make a living as a writer, you need to put out a fair amount of content. Or if you're so lucky, put out that really one masterwork and hope that it catches, right? But that is a rarity. For most of us, that would be a rarity, that we write, that we spend 10 years working on one novel and it turns out to be this great success and everyone buys a copy, right? And you make millions of dollars or whatever. That's pretty rare. For a lot of us that are looking to be these professional writers, we need to view professionalism as a matter of volume. And this is maybe the biggest challenge that I've experienced, because I have that perfectionist mindset, right? I want every story I write to be amazing, and I often have prioritized that in the past over productivity, over getting work out, over getting results, right? I'd rather have spent, 6 months, a year working on just one short story and getting it near perfect, rather than perhaps getting several really good but not great stories out within that same period of time. And I think as people that are looking to become professionals, I think we have to adopt more of that mindset, more of the idea of good not being, great not being the enemy of good, right? And to help illustrate this is an idea that came to me today. If you read these sort of classic, we'll just go short stories as an example. So you read these classic short story collections by writers, especially like 19th century, early 20th century, right? Who had, all the way up to the middle of the 20th century even, who had to make a living off their writing, who writing was their sole income. What you'll find with these collections are, A, they're very voluminous, right? But B, of the totality of stories, maybe half of them might be, really, really good. And of those really good ones, maybe a select few stand out, right? A good example for me is someone like H.P. Lovecraft, who, if you ever, buy his entire collection, right, of short stories, they do sell them, you'll find that, and at least for myself, I only enjoy maybe half of what he ever wrote, right? And it's not because of the bigotry or the racism, whatever. It's just his stories in general. Half of them just aren't very good. Like, they just don't. I don't find them to be very well. And then of the ones that are really good, the half that's really good, you have a select few that get celebrated, right? The Rats in the Walls, Call of Cthulhu, all that. There are select ones out of that collection that get celebrated, and he's remembered for, right? That's what we remember him for. Despite the fact that he is, the most prolific, probably horror writer of all time, right? Perhaps the most celebrated, unless maybe King trumps him. But I think most people would probably put Lovecraft in that top echelon, right? That is what I'm talking about. the idea that he put out a large volume, only a few ever stood out as like these great metal ones that we all know, and there's several below that are just really good and entertaining. But again, maybe half aren't even at the good and rereadable quality. And that's what it is. That's what survival is. It's volume. It's getting a lot out there. It's the equivalent of going camping and trying to survive in the woods with just the bare essentials for a couple weeks, right? If I sent you out into the woods to survive and say, on your own, right, with just the basic compass, knife, maybe, some flint to make a fire, your survival setup would not look pretty. The shelter that you made would not be this nice, evenly well-structured thing that's designed to last for 100 years, right? It might even have some leaks in it, might have some issues that you have to patch up the next day. The lean-to you make might be a little will be off-center, right? It does the job. The food in the game that you eat, right, probably is not going to be the most delicious, right? If you hunt game, you may not get all of the usable meat off it. You might fumble through it, maybe half of the meat that you could because you're inexperienced and you're just doing this just to survive. You're in that survival mentality. You're not caring about scraping every bit of meat off the animal. You're caring about getting the immediate sort of nourishment to survive the next day. That is the perfectionist mindset to a degree, right? It's being okay with the ugliness. It's being okay that it's not perfect, but actually surviving. Now, there is an element of doing your best, right? Doing the bare minimum to get by is not what we want. But survival is ugly. Survival is not pretty. And if you're going to be a professional writer, I think there's an element of letting go of the need to be perfect and accepting that there's going to be maybe a little bit of ugliness in your work. And being okay with that, moving on, learning from it maybe, but just being willing to accept that it might not be as grand as you wanted it to be.